You know that feeling, right? You land somewhere new, you step out of the airport, and there's just this immediate rush.
The excitement.
Exactly, the excitement of the postcard moments, the famous landmarks. But what really gets me is when you realize you've stepped into a fundamentally different operating system for everyday life.
It's those little friction points. You prepare for the grand experiences, but you rarely prepare for the moment when different suddenly throws your entire concept of normal for a loop.
Yes, that's what a cultural shock is. And we're going way beyond the typical travel tips here.
Right.
We're talking about those, baffling realizations, the moments you just stop and think, wait, people do the most basic things in ways I have never, ever considered.
And our mission in this deep dive is to explore those subtle, surprising differences. We pulled some fascinating sources to help you, the learner, not just appreciate human diversity, but to anticipate and maybe even laugh off those shocks on your next trip.
We've broken this down into a few core areas. We'll start with something universal, food, and then get into the really tricky terrain of social etiquette.
And then we'll finish up by looking at how culture shapes the big abstract stuff, like our view of time, work, and even those really specific superstitions that guide behavior.
So let's get into it. We're diving deep into the unspoken rules of the world.
Because what feels like common sense to you could be, completely bizarre to someone else.
And that's where the learning begins.
It really is.
And I think food is the perfect place to start. It's where those, wait, what moments happen almost immediately.
Instantly. I mean, everyone has to eat, but how we approach it is entirely learned. Consider something as simple as utensils.
Right, the knife and fork culture we're so used to, it's almost ritualized.
It is. But our sources contrast that so sharply with traditional methods. In India, or much of the Middle East and Africa, eating with your hands isn't just okay. It's the preferred, respectful way to eat.
It's a more direct connection to the food.
Exactly, an intentionality that cutlery can sometimes take away.
Yeah.
I loved that detail from the sources about the person from South Asia who was just shocked to see a knife and fork used on pizza.
Because it just ruins the fun of it, right?
To them, yeah. It was this unnecessary formality.
That's a huge cultural divider. And speaking of pizza, let's talk combinations. Our taste buds are so tied to where we're from.
Absolutely. You think you can order a pizza anywhere in the world, no problem.
Until you get one.
Right. And you're in Japan or South Korea, and it's topped with peas, corn, and you have to brace yourself. Mayonnaise.
Oh, I've heard about this. Lavishly.
It just clashes with that Italian concept of pizza, but it's totally normal and delicious there.
And it's not just about toppings. The sources mentioned watermelon with cheese in China.
That sounds strange to a lot of us, but if you think about it, it's just a sweet and salty, crisp and creamy contrast.
That's a good point. And it goes both ways, doesn't it?
It has to. I mean, the American classic, peanut butter and jelly, that sounds deeply weird to a lot of people from other cultures. Too sweet, too sticky.
Okay, so now we have to move on to what many consider the ultimate cultural test, adventurous delicacies.
Yeah, these are the foods that really push the boundaries of what's even considered food in the first place.
We're not just talking about unusual flavors here.
No, we're talking about reframing entire categories, like fried tarantulas in Cambodia. They're served crispy, which I understand was born out of necessity, but is now a real delicacy.
And then there's the famous one from Iceland, the fermented shark, hakal.
Oh, that's less of a meal and more of an olfactory challenge from what I've read. The process to even make it edible is intense, and the flavor is just potent.
But that process is the culture. It speaks to their history of food preservation.
Precisely. And even something that seems more familiar, like escargot in France. For someone who didn't grow up with it, eating snails still requires a pretty big mental leap.
So the big takeaway here is that our definition of delicious is just. It's a complete cultural construct.
And if our relationship with food is governed by culture, our relationship with people is even more complex. Which brings us to social etiquette.
Yes, the unspoken code. This is where you can break a rule without even knowing a rule existed.
Let's start with public silence and space.
The expectations are just wildly different around the world.
Take Japan, for example, especially on public transport. The sources really highlight this profound cultural value on respecting shared space, which basically means silence.
Talking on your phone or playing loud music isn't just annoying.
No, it's seen as actively inconsiderate, disrespectful of the shared calm.
Whereas in other places, a bus or a train is just a loud, vibrant extension of the street.
Exactly. And speaking of space, the whole concept of personal space is a massive cultural minefield.
It truly is. If you're from, say, the UK or Germany, you might keep a pretty wide bubble around you when you're talking to someone.
An arm's length at least. But that same distance in Latin America or the Middle East, it could be seen as cold or unfriendly. Standing close is normal. It's a sign of warmth.
Your comfort zone is literally a learned cultural boundary.
And when someone crosses it unexpectedly, you feel that discomfort instantly.
Okay, we absolutely have to address the tipping minefield. This is one of the most confusing things for travelers.
Oh, it's a huge one. Because in the U.S., tipping is completely baked into the economic system. It's not optional, really. It's expected.
It's a huge part of someone's income.
Right. But then you go somewhere like Japan, and tipping can be deeply insulting.
How so?
It suggests you think the employer isn't paying their staff enough, or that you're trying to show off. Your act of generosity is actually a social error.
So the same action giving extra money has a completely inverted cultural value.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
And it just shows that being respectful means learning the local rules, not just applying your own definition of politeness.
Okay, let's move on to some more concrete and often surprising public rules and norms.
This is where the law itself starts to enforce these cultural values.
And the classic example has to be Singapore's ban on chewing gum.
It sounds so extreme, but it comes from this really deep cultural emphasis on public cleanliness and order. The law has a clear purpose.
And the hefty fines show they're serious about it.
Very. And you see a similar dedication to order with, say, pedestrian behavior in Germany.
Oh, waiting at the red light.
Even when there are no cars in sight, it's not just about the traffic. It reflects this deep value of ordinance of order and following the system for everyone's benefit.
And then there's something like public displays of affection, PDA, a casual hug or kiss in public in France or Italy is nothing.
A total non-issue. Those exact same actions in more conservative culture could get you anything from dirty looks to, in some places, actual legal trouble.
It's all about how a society separates private life from public space.
Right.
Okay, are you ready for the one section where travelers really get caught off guard?
I think I know where you're going. Let's talk toilet culture.
This is critical prep knowledge. We have to discuss the squat toilet.
Yes, common across so much of Asia and the Middle East. And for someone who's only ever used a Western-style seated toilet, it requires a significant physical and mental adjustment.
But the cultural perspective is so important here. While some might see it as primitive,
Many people who use them view our shared toilet seats as profoundly unhygienic. It's just about what kind of cleanliness you prioritize.
and then you have bidets and toilet showers. They're everywhere in Europe and Asia, but they're still kind of a niche thing in the US and UK.
It's just a different standard of hygiene.
Yeah.
And finally, you've got the practice in places like Germany or the Netherlands of paying a small fee to use a public restroom,
Right, like 50 cents or €1.
which just highlights a different approach to who pays for public services. If the state doesn't cover it all, the user contributes directly to keep it clean.
All right, let's zoom out a bit. Let's talk about how culture impacts more abstract things like time and work.
This is where you get serious friction, especially in international business. There's this useful framework from the anthropologist Edward T. Hall, who talked about two approaches to time.
Monochronic and polychronic.
Exactly. So monochronic time is what you see in Germany or Switzerland. Time is a resource, it's linear, and you do not waste it. Being a few minutes late is rude.
It's disrespectful of the other person's time.
Right. But then you have polychronic cultures, like in Brazil or India. Here, schedules are much more flexible. Human relationships and events can take precedence over the clock.
So being, 15 to 30 minutes late for a social thing might be totally fine.
Completely fine. Because finishing the conversation you're currently in is more important than rigidly sticking to the next appointment.
The siesta in Spain is a perfect example of that, isn't it? It's not just about the heat.
No, it's a deep cultural prioritization of family, a social life, of rest, over non-stop work. It says a lot about a culture's internal clock.
And that flows directly into work-life balance. You have a culture like Japan's with its emphasis on long hours.
On presenteeism, just being physically there,
And you contrast that with, say, the Scandinavian countries.
where the focus is all on efficiency, shorter work weeks, and mandatory long vacations. The goal isn't hours logged, it's output achieved, and personal time is seen as essential for productivity.
It's a completely different answer to the question, is work the center of life, or is it a tool to support life?
Which brings us to our final area, the abstract but incredibly specific beliefs that influence everyday decisions, superstitions.
These are the habits that can really baffle outsiders. Let's talk about numbers.
A great example. In China, the number 4 is hugely unlucky
Why is that?
because the pronunciation sounds almost identical to the word for death. And this is so powerful that buildings will literally skip the 4th floor.
Wow. And it's not just an Eastern thing. In Italy, the number 17 is the unlucky one.
Yeah, the Roman numeral, X17, can be rearranged to spell Vix Wealth, which in Latin means I have lived, as in my life is over.
That's incredible. And of course, in the West, we have our own fixation.
The number 13.
Of course. And think about our own superstitions. Breaking a mirror is 7 years of bad luck. Knocking on wood.
You do it automatically.
Yeah.
And people from cultures without those specific beliefs must find them absolutely hilarious.
But these things, as random as they seem, they genuinely influence behavior. They show how culture shapes even our most unconscious routines.
So true.
Well, we've really taken a journey here, from how we eat a meal to how we view time itself. It's clear that experiencing these unexpected, often confusing moments is, well, it's essential to really understanding the world.
And while those moments can be disorienting, they're so enriching. They force you to stop, to question your own assumptions, and to realize that your normal is just one tiny possibility on this huge spectrum of human experience.
So as you continue your journey, whether that's through travel or just learning, remember to keep that curiosity alive.
And for a final provocative thought for you, the learner, take a second to think about an everyday habit from your own culture, something you do without thinking. Maybe it's how you greet people or your reaction to being 5 minutes late. Now flip the lens. Imagine trying to explain that normal to someone from a completely different background. How strange or illogical or even demanding might your simple routine suddenly seem to them?
That reversal of perspective.